Uh, hey everyone. So I wanted to have an open discussion about API contracts and how an API provider and consumer can um, work together in uh, adhering to a contract when working with API in between services, be that external services or even internal software, internal services. I was wondering if we could have a discussion about any pro tips, any experience that anyone has had with contract adhering to contracts. So I work at Wayfair. Just a little bit about my experience with contract testing. Um, so as I listened to this conferences throughout the 2 days, I kind of realized that we as an industry are kind of aligning on the same things. Open API is good. Async API for asynchronous communication and GraphQL, gRPC, and how to go about that, how to standardize on API communication. But one thing that I felt light was API contracts. Um, in our experience at Wayfair, we use a tool called Pact Flow or Pact, and that's what we use. It's open source unless you want to use their cloud storage. So what Pact does is um, it creates a contract between an API provider and an API consumer, and and make sure that they both adhere to that contract. Um, and that's how it works. It's a consumer driven contract based system. So if anyone has experience with this or any pro tips, I would love to hear. If you folks want to hear more from my end, happy to share. Happy to share more too. Okay, I guess like there's no like too much experience there. So one of the tips that we found when we were actually building this contract testing system is how not to get in the way of developers. When a consumer wants to use an API, then sorry, I'm getting some resound. Oops. When a consumer wants to use an API, they set up a pact, which is essentially telling the provider, hey, I'm going to use field one, field two, field three of your API with the following kind of data. And as long as you provide data in a specific structure to the pattern that we adhere and in the behavior that I expect, like give me a string when I expect a string, for example, give me a field that I absolutely expect to be in the response. As long as you adhere to that, we are good with that contract. So we've kind of built that on the fly. So when you go ahead and create a GitHub PR for like a new consumer that you API consumer that you've built, we automatically generate a patch representation for you that you can share with the API provider, and you can tell the team that owns the API provider, hey, here's a pack. Can you adhere to this for us? And at Wayfair, we kind of enforce providers to accept those contracts. Um, and once a provider accepts that contract, that becomes sort of binding in terms of both of them. And now, like, if subsequently the API provider wants to upgrade from, I don't know, version one, which the contract was based on, to version two, then they will need to establish a new contract with the consumer because the consumer is adhering to a contract that's based on version one, so they cannot break it or they cannot just delete that version of the API. So we found that this is a good way to like decentralize API governance. That is the core that we wanted because there's so many teams at Wayfair who have APIs. There's teams that provide order data. There's teams that provide product data. There's a lot of the supplier data, manufacturer data. So to have a single governing team to hold all of these teams accountable is not uh, feasible. So instead, you ask them to shake hands amongst themselves and get to a contract. And we found that stepping out of the way as platform teams or like API developers and API like experts and designers, that really um, helped us step back. Um, so yeah, I would highly recommend having consumer-driven contracts in your APIs, even in your public APIs, if that makes sense, because it's really valuable to have like a rock solid foundation that you as a provider or a consumer can both adhere to, and you trust that response. You trust the response's stability and the structure. So that's my 5 minutes on API contracts and how we went about it. Um, One major pitfall here, which is funny, was um, if since these are consumer-driven contracts that a consumer wants to use your API, if you're a provider, since it's driven by consumers, that means if you have a service that has like maybe hundreds of consumers, this does not make sense because it essentially becomes um, governance by ransom. What I mean by consumers can really hold you back from making any like valuable changes or like any version upgrades, because you will have to still support a boatload of people or boatload of teams who are still relying on a version that's prior to you. So this sort of like the pact and contract testing is really useful when you have maybe 5 to 10 services that are relying on you as a provider and you can support them. But if it's anything more than like 10, and then like it already gets overwhelming to move all the consumers to like a version that's um that's a better version than what you've had before. It's a huge cognitive load on the API provider to move them all. So that's a pitfall that we found, and we've realized that you don't need a contract provider for every single service out there. If a service is very high traffic and very heavily used by like a number of services, then there's different ways of testing it, like unit testing, service mocking, and stuff like that you can actually work with. Um, so, any comments? Any tips? Anything? I don't know how open discussions work, so I'm still trying to. I think I hope this is not a one-way thing.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Uh, I was curious, how much of the process you described is automated? Are you using some sort of contract specification like OpenAPI, and then from there, how do you actually how does the consumer and or the producer test the contract?
Got it. Yep. Thanks for the question. Yes, we use OpenAPI 3. We also have GraphQL specifications. We also have gRPC and async API. So um, so initially when the consumer is the one initiating the contract. So they will actually write a unit test, sort of a unit test with pact that says this. You essentially tell pact that this is the endpoint that I want to test on this provider. And you mentioned the version, you mentioned the actual API endpoints, and you also then you run that test once, and that generates a contract file based on that response at that moment in time. And then you upload that into like you can put it on GitHub, whatever. And this is all automated, by the way. When you actually write the test in in JavaScript, or if you have a Node.js app in Node.js, once you write like a simple Mocha test, it'll generate a contract for you on the fly. You just take that contract, you know, a quick Slack chat or like a virtual meet with the provider team, like, hey, this is a contract we want to access these fields. Are you okay with this? And once the provider team is like, yep, we are good with this, there's one manual step where you actually upload that generated contract to something called a packed broker, which is essentially a storage for these packed contracts and a distribution um, module that exists. So once you have that there, then the provider, on the provider end, we can generate a test based on that, a test based on that packed contract that the client or the consumer uploaded. So on the provider side, it just says like, okay, this is the packed contract, and this is the data that I need to provide. And every time, like the provider has a new GitHub PR, or they are trying to do a version upgrade, or they're trying to change the behavior of their API endpoints, that packed test will run along with your GitHub PR and verify that you are not breaking that contract. It is all automated. We use Bellkite on GitHub PRs, which is like one CI/CD, like one of the ways of doing CI. So as part of like the continuous integration pipeline, this packed test runs and ensures that the provider adheres to the contract for the version that it was written for. Um, so that is how we go about it. There's only one manual step in here. Um, in addition to writing code, which I mean, every developer and team has to write, I guess. The one manual step is to upload the generated packed contract to the packed broker. Eventually, we at Wayfair we are going to automate that too. I mean, if it's all in Buildkite, like on a GitHub PR on the consumer side of things, there's no reason we can't generate the packed and also upload it to the broker. But yeah, we are still building that tiny piece out. Um, hopefully that answers the question and like reveals a bit more on how much it's automated. All right, cool. I think we are like almost out of time. If anyone has any comments, if you're interested in reaching out to me, let me know. You have 10 minutes. Oh, I still have 10 minutes. I didn't know that. Okay, cool. Um, thank you. So yeah, so that's how we automate contract testing, and it is essential. I feel now like it has become one of the core things that we do to support APIs. We have a lot of automated steps because we don't want to like be the, as somebody mentioned in one of the sessions today, was you don't want to be the wall. You don't want to be the person or team that's stopping another team from developing APIs or building code. It's something you actually want to avoid, and paving a path for developer teams and showing like, hey, this is the way we've built the guardrails for you. If you want to explore and go off and do your own thing, like if you don't want to use contract testing, if you want to do something like end-to-end testing, where you have like a chain of microservices and you make a request that tests everything end to end, that is up to them. They are what we call the pioneers or the explorers, where they go ahead and do those things. But if teams want to follow a path that is already paved, then we have that option. We found that balance kind of worked, and I felt like during some of the conversations and sessions we had today, it was like hit or miss, where some presenters were like, yes, let's govern APIs a little bit more. Some presenters were like, let's stand back. So it was fascinating to see. I think we kind of took a step back and let the automation and tooling do the work for us.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think there's a couple of interesting things from what you've described. One is that you're using contract testing between teams within your company. That's pretty interesting to me. In the companies I've been involved in, the inter-team communication is much less governed versus the public interfaces. And it sounds like you're using a form of contract testing to actually let teams govern themselves, but in a structured way, which is really interesting. I'd encourage you to consider uh, uh, submitting a formal talk for next year's conference, because I think it'd be interesting to dig into this a little bit more and get a better understanding of what you're doing.
So it's not so. Just a quick clarification: we don't need like every service or team to do contract testing. By that I mean, so for example, if order management has like 10 teams inside of it, and they all have individual services, pretty sure they're all exposed through an API gateway or some sort of like federated gateway. And that's where contract testing comes in, because these teams are like so closely knit together. They essentially, if offices were open and we were still in offices, they would be sitting beside each other. So they don't need contract testing at that, if they are very close to each other and they know like day to day, like it's pretty much the same data set and then same domain that they're working on. But if a request or a team is coming outside that bounded context at that domain, like outside the order management domain, and trying to get into some data and request data from a service inside that domain, then contract testing makes a lot of sense. Where versioning and breaking changes and all of these make sense. But thank you. Like, yeah, I would love to submit a um, formal talk on this, because it gets really complicated. But when you actually step out and see the decentralized governance, it is kind of beautiful. So as of now, like we've succeeded. So hopefully in the next year we'll still be successful, and I can talk in much more detail about it.
And all of this is in-house developed tooling and automation.
Well, Pact is an open source, so Pact Flow. That's the um, open source tool that we use. There's a bunch of tools like Postman has collections, which does contract testing too. If I remember correctly, there's a bunch of tools out there that can do contract testing. We've chosen to use Pact because we use, we are GraphQL, we are REST. So Pact kind of supports all of those ecosystems well, and it was open source, and we had like enough scale to host our own storage for all these Pact contracts instead of using, Pact's cloud storage. That's what we use. But the surrounding tooling around Pact, like GitHub PR, Belkite, sort of that CI/CD integration with Pact, is something that we've custom built at Wayfair, at our company. Yep.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yep. I would love to open source it, but it's way too, like, I would say, new-ish. It's not even like we need to like untangle a bunch of company specific things before even thinking about open sourcing that. But it would be awesome to open source that as a CI/CD hook in there for people interested in Belkite specifically. Um,
Yeah, but even just the way that you're using it and how it's influenced your internal processes is pretty interesting.
yep. Yep. So yeah, we couldn't, like, we saw the number of microservices spinning up. So Wayfair recently went from this journey of from a monolith to microservices, the classic journey. And we just saw that, yeah, with 8,000 engineers or more, it's no way you can actually manage and govern these with a single team or a few teams. You need tooling, and you need paved paths for people to move really fast. Uh, so it is a fascinating conundrum. So I would highly recommend, if everyone has not checked the conference, that the session that I think Jay from Target, he had a session. That is a really good session, and we do something similar to what Target. He's from Target, so we do something similar to that, but in a slightly different, more hands-off way. I think it was APIs at scale. That was a session. All right, lovely. So yeah, so last call for any other tips, questions, yeah, you can reach out to me. I'm stymied underscore sloth on Twitter. Um, you know, that was a name I set up when I thought it was cool, but now I'm stuck with it. But you know, yep. All right, cool. So guessing there's no other like tips. It looks good. So thank you everyone. This was great. Thanks for like letting me voice my open like API contracts spiel. So thank you so much. Should we drop off and move to the next session? Is that yes, no? Okay. Thank you.